Cool. All right. Jacob, welcome to the Luke Beasley Show. This is my first discussion slash, depending on how this goes, debate. Obviously, for any of my YouTube viewers, I put something up on my Instagram account that said, if you're conservative and confident in your views, hit me up. And I would love to have a little combo because I think I've noticed in my personal life, a lot of people, and Jacob, you can, see if this is the case for you. A lot of people have just given up on trying to speak to people with different political views, um, because I think it's really uncomfortable. I suspect a lot of people just aren't confident in enough in their views. When I try to press them, they're like, I don't want to talk about politics. And what they really mean is, if you press me, it would get real shaky. Um, and so, but overall, I think we've gotten so divided and stuff that people have just given up trying, and then people just kind of stay in their little echo chambers. So hopefully we can break that down. Obviously, my goal is to only have valuable conversations and not just the ones that do really well on platforms like YouTube, which are just screaming. So we'll see how that goes. Thank you for being here, Jacob. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Jacob Laderman. I'm a 19-year-old college student, and I do agree in that sense that we're very divided. I think the problem is too that people, especially the further away from the aisle that you get, they make their political beliefs their entire personality. And I know a lot of people that have just completely stopped talking to me, ghosted, cut me off because I'm a Republican. So it's just what's the point of that? That's only going to hurt things.
Mm, yeah. I agree with that. One second. I'm going to make sure this is, do that real quick for, okay, cool. We're recording on all fronts. Just want to confirm. So yeah, to that, listen, I understand what you're saying, but also for me, I've increasingly made it a part of my whole personality, identity, and focus, because it's so intertwined with people's values and perspective on the world as a whole. And I've noticed in relationships, if I avoid talking about politics for a super long time, it just lengthens the period of time uh that it takes to get to know them on levels that I would need to know if like they're going to be a really good friend or partner or something. And so I've come to realize if I can just touch on politics with someone, I can instantly get a feel for their more broader moral compass and values and things like that. And so that's where kind of politics has become such a big part of my identity. And that's where people ask a lot. A poll went around like, would you date somebody of the opposite political leanings? And that what you want to answer, because it sounds nicer, is yes. Of course, I give everyone a chance. But when I think about like, could I date someone who's a hardcore Trumpster? I just think there'd be too many things about the way that we look at the world that would be too different for me to look past that in a relationship. Um, and so that's where it's like, but then, okay, someone who's maybe also sort of reasonable, but different views, maybe, that could work. But I think increasingly, because the topics that are discussed in politics are so important and so related to everyone's day-to-day life, it actually is a good litmus test for someone's kind of deeper personality. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I've dated both Republicans and Democrats from completely different stages, whether they're at the aisle or completely away. And I do stand with the point that I made that politics is not someone's entire personality. I'm sure that if I was a Democrat, my personality and the way that I look at the world might be slightly different. But I'm someone that for lack of better terms, I agree so much with individuality, obviously with being yourself, but also with, like, for example, in friendships, my relationship with one person is completely different from my relationship with someone else. And if two other people are going to get in a fight, I might have my opinions, but I'm not going to cease having a friendship with one of those people. And so it's like, I'm not going to take half of the country and be like, nah, I'm not going to even talk to those people. I think where it does kind of intertwine is you can see when you're having a political debate how an argument would go if you're in a relationship or a
That's
friendship.
true.
You can see how's an argument going to go if you get really heated in the debate. Okay, yeah, the arguments are probably going to be it will be pretty intense. But if you can have a civil debate and you disagree on some things, but that doesn't mean you don't judge the person or disrespect them for what they believe. I think it's totally different. You know what I mean?
Yeah, gotcha. And I agree. Definitely don't banish people from friendships. I have so many friends who are conservative and stuff like that. And it's to me, I process it in my brain like I know their moral character, and in my opinion, they're misled on this, that, and the other, but that doesn't necessarily reflect on like a deeper problem. But then, of course, if it goes too far, oh wow, like that person's racist or something, then. But anyways, with that being said, kind of outline how you would define your political views and where you sit on kind of the spectrum as far as politics goes, um, so that people can get a sense of where we might disagree in this conversation and where your opinions lie.
Well, you're never at one specific spot for your entire life. When I first started, being aware of politics around the 2016 election, I lean more Democratic. At the moment, I find myself as moderate Republican. I reach across the aisle on a lot of things. I'm willing to compromise. I think that's something that we don't see in our government that I would like to see a lot more of is that, I definitely would vote with Republicans or a Republican president, probably well over 90% of the time, but that doesn't mean that I'm not willing to reach across and make a compromise and negotiate. That's what politics is. Politics is the way that government works. And if you're not working together and if you're not working in the interest of the nation, then you don't have politics, which means you don't have a working government. And not only does your political party suffer, everyone does.
Okay. Um, and moderate Republican to you, you said 90+%. Uh, on which issues would you say you differ from the current middle of the Republican Party?
Well, the first thing I'm going to put out there is that I believe the 2020 election was legitimate.
Oh,
Um,
breaking
Joe
news.
Biden is our president. Whether I voted for him or not, he is our president. January 6th is something I completely disagree with. I definitely would not get up there to save one person you know, when you're working against the Constitution, you're in the wrong.
So to
Um,
clarify, you're not just saying that Biden is our president, because that's pretty clear. You're also saying that he's our rightful president and there wasn't
yeah,
significant fraud and such.
any any fraud that would have been found in the election would have been nowhere near enough to change anything. And especially well over a year since President Biden has been inaugurated, it's just you have another chance in the midterms and in 2024. That's how our democracy works. I'm never going to say one thing like, oh, there was absolutely zero fraud. Like, yeah, there were cases where there were, two ballots where the people that voted were dead. It's like, yeah, okay, two ballots, great. Is that going to change the entire election and give former President Trump, a second term? No,
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing. I'm willing to reach pretty far across the aisle when it comes to the feminist movements, the LGBTQ rights, but when it comes to taxes, small government, immigration, I'm pretty in my party.
Okay. So here's what confuses me about that. And to be clear, beforehand, you said you're down to talk about how you're a gay conservative, right?
Well, yeah.
So with that being said, because obviously I think you should be able to have a set of opinions regardless of if it associates with your given life experiences or your identity, but we do see that plays a big role. How do you square in your brain like you would vote for the lower taxes, which okay, largely those lower taxes are going to not towards the middle class, especially Trump's 2017 tax cut. But let's set that aside for a second. You're willing to vote for that party even when, and I don't know if you would admit to this, there's a full on kind of demonization going on from that party of a group that you identify with.
Yeah, something about the Democratic Party, which I find interesting, and I mean Democratic Party, is that it's more of a coalition of smaller parties that you would see elsewhere. For example, in Europe, you would never see AOC, Nancy Pelosi, and President Biden in the same political party. I think, they're going to have completely different opinions. And
For sure.
AOC many times has spoken out against Biden since he's been inaugurated, but they're still Democrats and she's still going to vote for him if he is the 24 Democratic
Oh, I
nominee,
see. I see
so
where you're
that's
going.
just kind of, huh?
I see where you're going. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, it's just there are definitely many Republicans that are anti-gay, anti-LGBTQ. If this streams in Florida at all, I just want to say gay, arrest me. Um, like that kind of stuff, I'm against, but there is a growing support for the LGBT community in the Republican Party, and it's been on the rise for the past 10 or so years. It's something that only recently has been made legal and supported by the Democratic Party. And as this kind of really, for lack of better terms, and to be blunt, as this older generation dies off, that's where we're going to see the more support. Most of our government is approaching or over 80. I think Mitch McConnell just turned 80, Pelosi's 81, Biden is 173 years old. That's the thing. And I've done a little bit of research on, I think it's called like the log cabin movement or something like that. And they actually gave Melania Trump their, yearly award. And Melania supports them. A lot of Republicans do support them. It's not something that's extremely talked about at a nationwide level. Something I will say about that Florida bill is that state politics are always a lot more polarized and radical than
True.
they are in Washington.
Yes, but there is I think one thing the Republican Party does uniquely is, I don't know if mobilization is the word or synchronization with their kind of nationwide goals implemented in state governments. You see like almost exact language in a bunch of bills that pop up at the same time that all came out of the same think tank. And then to give credit to kind of the right wing movement, they're way better at their media personalities come out at the same time. And obviously there's not some backroom planning, but it is the vibe of like a memo goes out and this is the new talking point, whatever it's about. This is how we're going to attack the
exactly.
justice nominee, ready, go. And then everyone does it. And I think it's similar with, we saw not much talk about trans athletes in high school sports. And then boom, across the country, bills introduced, similar language. Everyone in right-wing media is talking about it. And that's something they do to kind of get their followers amped up. But I guess the point that I'm trying to make is not, I get what you're saying. You can be a part of a party because you prefer it over the other. We only have two, and still differ and maybe even fight against, like I think a lot of progressives do, including myself, against the more corrupt Democrats that are in our party, the Joe Manchins, and still be a part of that party. And I recognize that and agree with it. But the reason that I support the Democratic Party in a general sense and fight within it is because it is also doing good things. Like Biden has done some material good, even though I don't think he's done enough. And then same thing with the Democrats in Congress and this in the Senate, the House and the Senate. But what is the material good that the Republican Party is doing that's good enough for you to not put up with, but still choose them over the alternative?
Well, one thing I will say is that, like I said before, I'm willing to reach across the aisle. You know, it's not that I'm a 100% a Republican, but I just couldn't be a Democrat and fight for all of their ideals, you know. I would be almost like a Joe Manchin on steroids, voting with the Republicans more times than I would the Democrats, and there's no use, you know.
And so you're saying small government. I hear that a lot, but it's a little vague, but I get the point. So you're kind of for deregulation generally, and
Yeah, you know, I'm for deregulation. Sorry, English is a hard language.
sure.
And just a lot of the things that they stand for. And, you know, I look at in recent history what the Republicans have done, and I try to look at it as well from a point of, okay, most of our voters, especially that are our age, and this very large population group, you know, they don't know much about politics. I would like to think that with research I've done and everything I'm studying, that I understand our political system a little bit more than the average college student. And so just trying to look at it from that perspective of, okay, just taking the things that each person has done, which do I think? And honestly, I feel like the Republican Party just has a lot more historical and recent historical greatness in it. And it's unfortunate that we're kind of taking this turn. And I definitely won't support, you know, anything like the far right QAnon beliefs and that the election was stolen. That stuff I won't support and I'll vote against. But when we're raising gas prices and not opening pipelines and not tapping into our reserves, and for example, starting to do business with Venezuela, which is their government is a government that we don't even recognize. We don't recognize the Nicolas Maduro government. Saudi Arabia, which is kind of our frenemy in a way, you know, I could see doing deals with them. You need to have your foot in the Middle East more than Israel, but then Iran. Like if we're going to get a bailout from Iran and Venezuela, especially, what can you stand on? That's not only disgraceful, I think it's just hypocritical. More than, as we joke about, you know, me being a gay Republican, like that's a contradiction, right? But that doesn't make me hypocritical because I still stand for both. But just what I'm seeing right now, if we want to talk in very recent terms of, you know, Biden, he really dropped the ball on a lot of things. You know, I'll give him credit that unemployment right now is at a historically low rate, uh, even after what they've been calling the Great Resignation. I just heard that term today for the first
I've heard
time.
that.
Yeah, that makes me laugh. But, you know, I'll give him credit for that. You know, we could obviously gas prices with this Russo-Ukrainian war are gonna be higher, but there are things that we can do within our country to help bring down the prices. And what I think we should do is, you know, suspend the taxes, the gas taxes right now that in California amounts for $1.18 of what we pay at the pump. You know, obviously that's still going to put us in the high fours for gas prices, but that's better than, you know, in San Diego right now in the low sixes for gas. That's just astronomically high. And Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, who's a Democrat, you know, a staunch Democrat, she supported legislation to suspend the state and federal gas taxes until we could get this under control. So I
100%
just,
support that. What's the uh Biden piece though? Because what I hear, you know, you drive around where I live, and there's all those Biden stickers that are pointing at the gas price and saying,
oh,
"I
the
did
I
that."
did that. That's funny.
Yeah, it is
I
funny.
find it
But
funny.
what is something that Biden could do or could do differently or did do wrong that affected gas prices that he could actually affect them in the short term? Because I agree with you on a state level, that's a
Yeah.
great, and I
Well,
support
off the
that
bat, I was completely against shutting down the Keystone pipeline. I'm sure that's something we'll disagree on.
definitely.
I'm not, just because I'm against shutting down the Keystone pipeline doesn't mean that I'm against working towards renewable energy, right? I think that, and I'm a Republican and watch this, I think that climate change is something that does need to be addressed.
Mm,
You know, do I think it
Bending my
right.
brain.
Do I think it's the biggest issue in our country today?
Yes, you do.
No. Yes, yeah. Just put the words in my mouth. No, I don't think it's the biggest issue, but I do think it can be addressed. However, we just don't have the technology to fully switch and to start, hitting the ground running.
So,
Have you heard of Elizabeth Colbert?
mm-mm.
Maybe Colbert. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. She's an environmentalist, and I was reading what she wrote, Under a White Sky. I think it's a couple years old, but she was talking about solar geoengineering, which just really, it harnesses the power of solar, and that's something that we're doing. And something she admits is that, we're gonna really help not stop the earth from warming, but prevent it from warming at a catastrophic pace. But we don't have a way to just expel these UV rays. They're still going to come back down, and they're still going to warm the earth, and it's still going to be a problem. So it's like we just don't have technology that we can make a full switch. And however, we have technology right now that with fossil fuels right now, we can keep this country running. And until we have technology to build more renewable, sorry, more ways of harnessing renewable energy, I think we need to stick with.
But okay, so let me cut you off. So I agree with you. As far as gas prices in this exact moment, you're not gonna pass some, green energy bill and next week we see lower gas prices. There's more short-term things that would have to be done on that level, but the broader conversation, absolutely the technology is getting there or there in many ways. I agree with you. There's a huge need for the battery ability to actually store this energy. But if we wait for the natural push and pull of capitalism to do the flip for us, it's gonna be too late because it's already too late. But that's why people advocate for something like the Green New Deal, even though that's so demonized that I don't like using the term. It has so much baggage, but a massive government nudge to industries and investing a lot in those research and developments so that we have the technology and we're totally able to do it because we're seeing the rapid development without much government like support or incentivization, and we're already seeing huge enhancements in what we're able to do. And so if you add in the layer like we did with oil and gas and we're currently doing of subsidies and adding all these governmental incentives for people to research that technology and develop the technology, then we could get there in not too long. And if you think about, and I'll finish up here so you can jump in. If, for example, under the Obama administration, if he was able to do more and mobilize a really big movement towards that, and we were way more, renewable energy powered right now, I mean, that's the way to get more meaningfully energy independent, is for us to be kind of the green energy capital of the world, tons of manufacturing jobs and tons of patented technology that we could have under our, American umbrella. How much more authority we could have now and not have to be going and groveling to Saudi Arabia and Venezuela and around like you're saying. It could have made a huge difference. And whatever the conflict is in the next 10 years, even letting go of the conversation of climate change, how much more able we would be able to just do what's right and not have to worry about being so dependent on other countries when it comes to oil, because we produce our own green energy, would be a huge benefit.
Yeah, and if we're going to start making switches now and start doing that, that's fine. But what the problem that I see and where I really disagree is that a lot of people are trying to dismantle the old system before the new system has time to be put in place. Driving around Southern California, really the only thing that I see is the solar panels on, roofing, roof, and schools. And I think there's one off 405 by the Kaiser hub. There's a large solar plant there. But other than that, I just don't see the infrastructure right now. Now, if we want to start building the infrastructure to do that, let's do it. Democrats and Republicans have always been relatively united over infrastructure. And it is something that, although you might not be able to get the far right into, you can definitely get a 51 vote. You might even be able to get a 60 vote. You know what I mean? You could get the supermajority on it if we build the infrastructure. Once we have the infrastructure and it's ready to be used, then we can start, shutting down the pipelines and all of that. But it's just, I don't see how everyday American citizens across the country can make that switch before the infrastructure is here. The technology, I don't think is here, but I'm also not a scientist. I could be wrong. The technology could be here and ready to be used, but the infrastructure is not. We can't dismantle this system before the new one has time to work. If we want to bring in an adversary right now, that's how Russia is what it is today. The old system of communism in the Soviet Union was dismantled before the new one had time to work. And that's why the USSR collapsed. The Eastern Bloc, obviously the satellite states, were going to collapse anyway. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about, the territorial bounds and republics of the former Soviet Union, that they completely dismantled this old system, saying, and then we're going to build this new one and it's going to be great. And I'm sure it could have been great, and we could have been allies with Russia. However, that's what happens when you dismantle an old system before a new one has time to work.
So yeah, good point. There's a couple notes on that. The first, I do think you're massively underestimating where the technology currently is, because there's already huge chunks of our energy in certain areas that are completely renewable. And the second thing, and that could definitely be, hugely increased if we had any sort of governmental action taken. The second thing, I think when it comes, like you're talking about shutting down the pipeline and things like that, because it's a mixed economy, but in a capitalist-ish society, most of the Western world, yeah, you do have to guide capitalism to where we want to go. And that's going to be done through incentivization, like I was talking about. But then you also do have to start pushing from behind too. You want to lead them towards it and push their butt a little bit. And one of the ways you do that is start not giving out new permits and shutting down pipelines. Also, that particular one does a lot of soul damage to the environment. But because then those companies are forced to look in other directions. And that is what's happening slowly. You're seeing a lot of traditional car companies and oil and gas companies look into, okay, how can we shift our model now that it looks like we don't know when, but at some point in the future, it's gonna do the switch, and it's already doing that. We're seeing them start investing that technology and worrying about that. And so if I agree, there needs to be a much better process of implementing infrastructure. Oh, that third note is that I don't agree with you that you would get 60 votes or 51. Maybe 51 with just the Democrats, Kamala breaking the tie. But I mean, you saw them try to put green energy stuff into the infrastructure bill that Biden attempted to pass, and they were not down with that. They got like a little bit of funding for charging stations. So I think it's kind of a walk and chew gum at the same time type deal, where the only way you're going to get it to happen fast enough is you simultaneously invest in infrastructure and incentivizing industry to move in that direction. And then you also stop especially, I mean, we're actively subsidizing oil and gas still. Crazy. The biggest industry is okay. And start positively and then also negatively incentivizing for these industries to move to green energy.
Yeah, what The biggest note that I want to make is with I really don't remember the name of it, and I'm not going to use Green New Deal, but with that bill that didn't necessarily pass, a lot of the reasoning for that and what you've seen that can be a common theme, in my opinion, is that the Biden administration, helped by Pelosi and Schumer, they're just trying to throw things in to law and just throw huge packages in because have, they have what they need for a majority in the House, can't give up any votes, I think give or take one or two. In the Senate, they're at 50. They can't afford to lose anything. So the more that they can pass, the easier it'll be maybe in their mind to not have a majority, but the way that they're doing it isn't working. They're coming out with these $1 trillion deals, whether it's infrastructure, COVID. I think the first part of his Build Back Better plan did get passed, if I'm not mistaken. And this Green
The
Deal.
bipartisan version.
Yeah, well, you're expecting to pass a $3 trillion bill where many Republicans did come out and say, I can support certain aspects of this bill, but not everything. There were certain things that we can get into later if we want that I would have supported if it was put up as its own bill. And I think it would have passed, and a lot more of the president's agenda could have been passed if he wasn't putting it through $3 trillion bills. Because no matter what realistically can be passed or not, $3 trillion just looks like a lot. And for someone that
So,
doesn't read the entire bill is not going to vote for it, rather
so
than breaking it up.
yeah. First of all, even with all that, it bothers me to no end the way that that's branded. Part of that is the Democrats' fault, but we spend it was three, or was the initial one 3 trillion, maybe a little bit more than that.
I honestly don't remember. They're all in the trillions.
Yeah, over 10 years. We spend double that on our defense budget over 10 years, but we don't talk about our defense budget in terms of trillions. We say 700 plus billion per year. It's just because it is laid out in a 10-year span, and these types of programs are ones that would insanely benefit everyday people. I mean, we're talking about the child tax credit was in there, extending that, which that lapsed, and instantly, I don't know if you support that or not, but instantly, I don't know why they initially passed it for just 1 year in the rescue plan, but whenever it ended that 1 year, I think it was like 50% of, I can't remember, a massive amount of 1 million kids dropped instantly back into poverty or something like that. And then the child care, the universal child care, universal pre-K, things that those are all on the child front, and then expansion of Medicare coverage to hearing, dental, and vision. And so these aren't things that are just being thrown in the garbage. If you're going to spend $3 trillion on something over 10 years, I'd rather that than a gazillion planes that we're not using. But with all that being said, you mentioned people just are going to have a hard time supporting a $3 trillion thing. That's not true. Even whenever it was all mishmashed together, people barely knew what was in it as far as the American public goes. And the mainstream media was doing a very poor job of explaining. It still had a majority support among the country. And so I disagree that people are that daunted by a large price tag if it's things that would materially benefit their lives.
I have to disagree in the sense of one of the things that I had mentioned earlier in our discussion was that most of the American public doesn't necessarily pay much attention to politics, at least as much as I think they should.
Agreed.
If you're in a staunch Republican supermajority constituency, then yeah, you can get away more with what you would like. But for example, Joe Manchin, who I know our views differ on, regardless of what he does and doesn't support, a lot of the Democratic bills that he opposes is because he's in a way listening to his constituents.
No, I'm not even gonna
No,
let you finish
his
that sentence.
his his state
Oh, okay.
is
What did you say? You said a lot. Okay, maybe yeah. Some of the Democratic bills he doesn't support because of the constituents. Finish your thought, and then I'm gonna say why that's incorrect.
Joe Manchin, if he supported every Democratic bill that Biden has put forth, would not be reelected in in the Senate for West Virginia. And without Joe Manchin, you guys do not have a majority. And you can't even have a shot at getting anything passed.
Um. Oh, okay. So I'm trying to think about what stuff Biden proposed, but we're primarily talking about Build Back Better, right?
Yeah, we
When
can
you
talk
when
about
you
Bill.
say if he had like, what do you generally? Because it's not like Biden has proposed that many things, except for yeah, maybe he shouldn't. Mansion, I agree. Probably it would be politically non-beneficial to support anything that Biden puts forth on gun control or something like that. I agree with that. But as far as his Build Back Better plan, you polled West Virginians on that exact plan and they loved it. It was so popular. And then you poll them on individual things like you were saying, and we're getting up to 70% of West Virginians who support things like Medicare expansion and child tax credits and stuff. And so this is what bothers me so much about the characterization of Joe Manchin is pretending like he's just this salt of the earth West Virginian who is listening to his constituents, and that's why he's tanking all of Biden's agenda. West Virginians are socially very conservative, and when it comes to the culture war issues, they're probably going to fall more on the right. But very, very, very broadly over the last number of years, economic things, a lot of West Virginians fall very progressive. I'm talking about a majority, even though I agree it's a very red state. And so there's no evidence-based argument you can make to it would somehow have hurt Joe Manchin to have been a part of the plan that got a bunch of his constituents subsidized childcare and stuff like that. Because they say when they're polled, they very much would want that.
And that's the thing that's individually, these points in the bill that are made individually, a lot of them
But I'm saying even
support.
Build Back Better, just that term, people supported the bill with that label. Let me look it up.
Yes, exactly. But the way that it's portrayed, not by Republicans, but by Democrats in the media, you guys didn't talk about it as well as you guys should have to have gotten it passed. You know, something that I hear about this, just a very small side tangent, something that Biden had done in the very beginning of his term was he was always blaming everything on the Trump administration, whether it was Trump's fault or not, is irrelevant. But something that I supported that Trump would do through his presidency, he was always bringing to the front the accomplishments that he made. You know, he presided over a great stock and housing market. You know, he presided over economically a great time in the United States pre-COVID, which was a majority of his term. And it's just one of those things that the Democrats don't do that I think they could get a lot more support if they did,
Oh
was
yeah.
come forward and say, let's look at this. Because, for example, I support the Medicare, the community college, the universal pre-K. Let's do it. I think education is so important. And if we're going to get millions more people enrolled in community college by making it free, let's do it. Like, I will support that. But you guys aren't bringing that out. You're just bringing forth a kind of rebuttal of a price tag. Whereas if you guys were to be more upfront and say, okay, but this is what's in it. Yeah,
Yes.
individually, West Virginians probably support most of the bill. I think a super majority in the country supports a good amount of that bill. But what I'm trying to say is that the way that we're coming about it is just so wrong and off of what it should be that could get a lot more things done.
Oh yeah. Totally
Like
agree with you on that.
I don't want to come across as a person that's like, no, you should have to pay for childcare when you're working and an 80-year-old should not get dental work done for free. No, like, you know, my grandparents are on Medicare. tons of people are on Medicare, and it's something that is really beneficial. You know, community college, as I said before, is very beneficial. I think you need an education past high school, and to not have to pay for the general ed to get that done is fabulous. Starting young toddlers in a universal pre-K is a great idea, especially with COVID, where there's been a hindrance in the skills.
Mm-hmm.
We need to kind of get that boost. But
Yeah.
just the way that everyone's going about it is wrong. You're
So
not going to get.
you're making yourself sound like a progressive, because that's the exact critique that the progressives have of the, and I need anyone watching this to really listen to what I'm about to say, because I'm going to do it in heavy air quotes, moderate wing of the party. I think my views are incredibly moderate, but people who just take a bunch of money from certain industries call themselves moderate for voting against legislation that is very popular. Hate that that term is used in mainstream media to define people like Manchin, but let's set that aside. Branding, I mean, and just advocacy for your own successes or proposed beneficial actions that you want to do. The Democratic Party, and this is why a lot of people on the left say they're paid to lose, like they take these campaign contributions and then purposefully do really bad. I don't think it's that simple. I think nothing in politics is that simple, but I do think they're fine playing the swing back and forth and the Republicans beat them, because it's great for them. They raise a bunch of money. They get to keep staying in power, and on we go. But to make actual meaningful change in the country, you absolutely have to be way better at advocating and getting the word out about your bill. I do remember they did a poll about Build Back Better, and then, well, two separate things. So they polled it and then explained what was in the bill and then polled it again, and it was like, oh, actually I like it way more. And then also they asked how many people knew what was in the bill, and most people, or I don't know if most, but so many people were like, I don't even know what's in that. And that was Biden's one big proposal. Nothing in Trump's administration was like that. You knew exactly what he was trying to get done, no matter how much you disagree with it, because he was constantly
Exactly.
advocating for it. And that's what you have to do to have any chance in uh in our country of having people be aware of it, because people are living their lives. They have work, they have kids, all these things going on. You can't expect them to be keeping up like maybe you or I do with the inner workings of Congress and Joe Manchin's doing this and that. And but I think that's only an argument for the party to listen more to people like AOC and Bernie Sanders, because they're the ones who are out there relentlessly trying to explain to people the value that could be gained from this bill. And even though it sounds like such a big change, it's actually something that would be so valuable. And so many, almost all other countries in the Western world have these systems already implemented. And that to me is just a great refutation of Manchin being any sort of benefit to the world.
So aside from Manchin, because I think what we've both done, we're taking one person and diving into it a little too much. You know, I've already established what I would have supported in that bill, but something that I have a hard time voting yes on all of it for is just how are we going to pay for it? Just whether it's taxes or what, how are we going to pay for this bill realistically? You know, it almost, to me, from what I've heard from, you know, I've had a couple conversations, for example, Katie Porter, who, and I don't know if you live in South Orange County, that's the District 45
I
rep,
love
Mike
her to
Levin,
death.
he's the District 49. It, from what they've all said, it's that they're going to raise taxes, whether it's at a $400,000 plus income rate or not. You know,
Well,
raising
in the
taxes.
language of the bill, they have you're saying you concede that it's only 400,000 or more.
Yeah, like I know
Okay.
that was something that Biden campaigned
And you're
on.
against that. You're against raising taxes on wealthy people.
Partially. I think the wealthy people, the influencers, the big business, those are the people that you need in your corner to get something passed, to advocate for something.
But they're not going to help you get anything passed that goes against their interests.
down there doing that. In the room I'm in, it's not an instructional building. We're good. Just waiting.
Oh, well, I don't even think I can barely hear it. Is there's like an announcement or something?
Yeah, they're
Oh, there
doing
we go.
it.
Now I got
It's
it.
actually very loud in here.
I heard it that time. That was weird.
Yeah, no, they changed the mask requirement. So in the room that I'm in, you don't have to wear them, and I'm also alone. But out in public areas and in the classrooms, you still have to wear them, and I wear them getting to the before I have to.
Yay.
But from what I was saying before, you need very specific people to be in your corner. And the other thing is being said is that politicians in general, the ones that we have, and CEOs of big business and all that, a lot of them are Democrats and will most definitely find loopholes to get out of it. When someone says they have a great tax guy, that doesn't mean that your taxes are going to be simple. It means that that mask I just picked up is going to be claimed as a dependent and I can lie on my taxes. You know what I mean? So it's just people are going to get out of it. You're going to raise the taxes. That's when you weren't living here at the time, but for example, California partially had done a gas tax to get at the wealthy. That was one of the reasons they inputted this gas tax. And the wealthy ones, the wealthy 1%, they're the ones that are kind of driving Teslas and the electric cars that don't pay for gas. So the middle class was really hit with that tax that we shouldn't have been hit with.
So
like they're gonna
I
get
think
you guys taxing the wealthy on paper sounds like a great idea, right? Obviously somebody with millions and millions of dollars from a percentage standpoint is gonna pay more taxes than me or you. And that I can support that. We do it on a proportional, 10%
but again,
of
a lot of
their
times like they don't. What I would call moderately wealthy, so those that most people would look at, like, they have a lot of money, but they're not the 100 millionaires or the billionaires. A lot of times they pay a lot in taxes, but then the top people, that report came out that showed people like all the biggies, Bezos, Elon Musk, and then even in a corporate sense, Amazon pay 0% in taxes or $0 in taxes or 1% or 5%. So even less than a lot of working class people. So
but that's the
wait,
thing.
but before you jump in, the more important point I was going to make, that was kind of a side thing. I agree that people will get out of it, but that's because they donate a bunch to politicians who keep the tax system the way that it is. The reason that it's the way that it is to leave all those loopholes for certain individuals. I mean, you and I don't have teams of hundreds of lobbyists and millions of dollars to donate to super PACs for politicians to influence them to not change the tax system, to leave it the way that it is so that we can do loopholes. So it's only the ones who already have the wealth and the power that are able to like influence the politicians in that way. And just so you know, a little point, this is going to be maybe a long tangent because it's kind of a lot of my broad political ideologies. I'm actually not, a lot of people on the left love like the wealthy suck, blah, blah, blah. I'm not like that. I think that's so reductionist, and you're just going to run around in circles screaming like tax the rich until the cows come home. And I think it's more about addressing the system that allows the wealthy to have so much outsized power in our political system. And, hating Jeff Bezos, it's so annoying that someone like him wouldn't pay more taxes than a working class person, and I'm talking about income tax. I'm sure he pays in other ways. But it's not going to do anything because if you disappeared Jeff Bezos, someone else is going to fill that place. That's the way the system's set up. When the incentives are in a certain place, humans are just going to do certain things. And so we have to get a powerful enough movement that changes the system in such a way where the incentives aren't in those places. So again, I'm not like I hate the wealthy type of person, and I'm not screaming tax the rich, like just raise the tax rate. Even though I think we could do that too. They could definitely afford it. But I do think if an actual uncorrupted candidate, or not candidate, uncorrupted individual got into office and had the support of enough uncorrupted people, which is what the kind of the progressive movement is working on right now. And we're getting in more and more people in Congress, for example, and closer to the White House. Then I do think you would have a real chance of changing the tax system so that maybe we're not even raising the tax rate on anybody. We're just actually getting the tax rates that we say we're supposed to be getting. Because if you look at the rates and the effective, like how much people actually end up paying and how much the IRS reports that is like not paid in taxes, it's insane. We could do so much with that money. And so when I say get it from the wealthy, a lot of times I just mean we need people who aren't bought off by big corporations with their massive contributions and with all these special interest groups to get in. And I do think this is feasible, even though it's a long journey, and change the tax system in such a way that people actually pay, especially wealthy people, the tax rates that we assign to them, and there aren't all those loopholes. And I do think money in politics, the way that we currently allow it to happen, where corporations can be people and money is speech, is the root of almost all of our political issues. Because if like the average voter's opinion was actually reflected in the representation in Congress, we would have amazing things getting going, because a lot of people support amazing things. But that's not who a lot of the politicians are listening to.
Exist.
They're listening to their special interest groups. So a lot of other countries have different ways of funding elections that don't allow that to happen. I'm so sorry that was so long. It had to be said. Go ahead.
You're good. Just like what you said, we're not going around saying tax the rich, tax the rich. And you made a point that the super, super wealthy, these Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, all these people that are paying $0 in income tax that definitely should be paying much more than that. The problem with that is that you guys don't have those people in your corner at this moment to make any sort of change. On paper, it sounds like a great idea, but try telling Jeff Bezos he's going to have to pay $8 billion in income tax and just see how that goes. It's like, that's not going to go over well with the way that our government functions right now. And that's not because our government is as divided as it is. That's just because of human nature. I'm someone that believes that money corrupts, and the more money that you have, the more corrupt it's possible for you to turn out. I think it's a great thing. And this is me just being a pessimist. So that might be where we differ. You sound a lot like an optimist. I am a little more of a pessimist when it comes to politics. We're not going to get a completely uncorrupt politician in the White House in either of our lifetimes. It's a great thing to hope for. If it actually happened, I would be
Bernie
very
was this close.
You're not going to get the support, even though I don't know if they're Democrats or not, but even though Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and all of those, I'm completely blanking on every other big business CEO other than those two.
Throw out Elon Musk.
Elon Musk.
The Koch brothers.
Yeah. He's the one that made the penis rocket, right?
Yeah. No, that was Bezos.
Like
that was Bezos.
That was Bezos, yeah.
Yeah.
Only reason I remember his name. Also, because I get Prime and free shipping and all that, so that's great.
Oh my goodness.
But that's the thing, is that in a capitalist society, like, there's gonna be people that make that much money that are gonna lobby and get different loopholes out of it. What you're saying is really a great idea, and obviously Jeff Bezos should pay astronomically more than I do in taxes. The only way that we have that has been conceived in human history to combat that and to have everyone pay, equal taxes, if that, has never been implemented. That's communism. That's the thing, is that I think it was Winston Churchill that had said that democracy is not a good form of government. It's not a good way to run a country, but no one has found anything better. John F. Kennedy said in 1963 that democracy has a lot of problems and there's a lot of loopholes like this, but we don't have to build a wall to keep our people in. There's always going to be corruption with our current state of the world and how things are run. There's always going to be corruption. There's always going to be a lot of people in the background saying, yeah, we need to tax the rich and get this done. And I think a majority of the country well over what's needed for a supermajority will support that. Not like I'm not denying your evidence at all that in West Virginia, for example, more than 60% of people support a lot of that Build Back Better plan. Like, I'm not saying you're wrong in any of that, but I think it's like a lot of people, and I'm not saying that you do this, obviously I don't know you well enough to know if you do. A lot of people take an entire paragraph long quote, take the 2 sentences that's going to help them, and use that as their evidence. I don't know for a fact that an overwhelming amount of West Virginians support that bill. I'm sure on paper almost everyone does, but it's how we go about it, and the fact that we just don't have ways to tackle the loopholes that we have. They're not going to be as optimistic as it is and as great of an idea as it is to want to get these people to pay income tax and not basically commit tax fraud. It's not something you're going to get done. And that's one of the reasons that I'm not necessarily going to vote for those kinds of things. One, because I personally don't think it's going to work. And two, I would rather combat and put more time into things that I think actually will work and that will be supported, whether it's at a domestic or an international stage. Taxing the rich, it's not going to work. You're not going to get anywhere with it.
So, okay, to kind of the tail end, have a few things to hit on that. The West Virginia point, yeah, we see time and time again, it seems like people will vote against their interests. And I think it comes down to what you were saying about people being educated on politics. And what they're aware of is, hey, Trump, I love how he, I don't know, owns the libs, or he's going to protect my Second Amendment or whatever. And
Here's
then
one thing that I will say before you go on that I think just not necessarily in the mind of a Republican, but a lot of Americans who don't necessarily have as much information. I look at my life in early 2020, before COVID, and even after the big quarantine in June or July when Trump was running for office. I saw at the pump I was paying $2.40 in South Orange County, granted at Costco, but in South Orange County, I paid $2.40, less than $20 to fill up my tank. The money that I was making, I was working full time, just because I was 18 didn't mean I didn't work full time. I didn't make minimum wage, but I made above minimum wage. And what I make here from effects of the Trump presidency, I can live on my wage. That's the thing. It's just, if I didn't know much about politics and I saw, okay, this is how my life was under the Trump administration, and this is how my life is under the Biden administration, literally 3 times the amount that I paid 2 years ago in the last year of the Trump presidency. When I'm looking at a war that Biden really is kind of not going fully at, when I see how we pulled out of Afghanistan, it's just, when you look at that, not even analyzing anything that either two of the presidents really did, it's not in his favor. So where I can totally support a lot of things, morally, and a lot of Republicans can too. There's just too much attention being put on the Trump wing. But what a lot of Republicans can morally support too is a lot of this kind of stuff that is put through, but we just don't have a way to implement it. We don't have a way to implement it that in the short term, you're going to see good effects. It's going to take a really long time for these effects to be put in place. And in my opinion, you guys don't have enough time until the midterm elections to see these positive aspects. So everything will get passed. Let's say everything does get passed. Great.
I can't have too much to respond to in one batch. So
okay, then go ahead.
Okay. Just because I still want to get your earlier thing had a lot of points I want to get to. And then feel free to pick up on what you're saying. So right there, yeah, the gas thing specifically, if you know how what affects gas prices, or what affects gas prices, you'd understand. I've always believed, since I got interested in politics, presidents have very little to do with gas prices. unless, again, you had some huge change in your energy policy. Canceling one pipeline is not going to do it. And what really caused this particular surge is, our entire economy collapsed, and that was going to happen in some form or another. I think Trump poorly managed a lot of the COVID crisis. But again, even if my favorite president ever was in there, we would have had a huge economic downturn. And
their approval
everyone was,
ratings would have suffered.
yeah. Well, a lot of leaders across the world surged to re-election because they came off as like a leader. Like, you remember, even though Governor Cuomo, but that little phase where he was
I'm
coming
not
out every
gonna.
day and handling it really well in people's eyes with all of his little press briefings. And even though people were dying a bunch in New York, people thought he was leading well and his approval rating soared. So I do think if you would come off like a resolute leader and you were doing your best, you could have actually gotten very popular during that crisis. But I agree, it would have caused a lot of economic pain. And then I think most presidents, because even a very conservative one, still allowed lockdowns to happen and supported them for a brief period there. And when that happened, so much transportation stopped. Demand for oil just went gone. And so then prices were super, super low. They were low before that too. I'm not saying that's what caused the lower prices, but that really caused zero demand. And then our supply chains got all whacked out. And then OPEC is withholding the oil reserves. And all of a sudden, like, this demand increased through the roof again. So of course you're going to see a huge rise in gas prices. Very little that Biden could have done about that, but I agree, a lot of people who aren't looking into the details of it are going to blame him for that. Okay, boom. Back to what you're saying earlier. You said rich people aren't in Democrats' corner, and that's why nothing's ever going to get done. Or you're not going to raise.
In your corner, but fiscally, no, they're not.
Yeah, agree. Totally agree.
I should have worded that differently then, and I'm sorry that I didn't. Socially, if we're talking socially liberal, my mother, for example, votes with Democrats astronomically more than she votes with Republicans. She's very fiscally conservative, and she just decides that, what, the social aspect at this time is more important to me than the fiscal. So I'm going to vote that way. But I think you could definitely and the evidence of that is, I've seen Bezos, they've all put millions, if not billions of dollars into a lot of humanitarian aid and that kind of stuff. And I know, for example, when I think it was one of the hurricanes in 2017 that hit Puerto Rico, Pitbull was sending his private jet to help send aid. Like, these very, very wealthy people socially are most definitely in your corner, and I want that.
No, but I agree. If you're trying to get their support going against their own financial interests, they're not going to do that. And I don't even blame them. I mean, I wish they would be selfless, but of course I don't blame them. That's where the incentives are.
But so then your bill isn't getting passed. There's not enough support.
Wait, so that's what I'm responding to. This is the reason why democracy is so valuable. At the root of it all, politicians' number one priority is to be in power and stay in power. And the reason for that is different. There's various reasons. Some people that I like do it because they genuinely want to help their constituents. I think that's a smaller percent. I think most of them have this blend where they get in for the right reasons. And then once they're in there, they're like, oh, the only way I can really stay in power is to take a lot of this corporate money. And then I can't go against their interest. We're going to lose the corporate money. But and then they frame it in their head. Okay, I'm going to do the best that I can do, but within the parameters of this. So it gets real complicated as you go on with what the push and pulls are on different politicians. But at a base level, if they're convinced that they cannot win an election, or are convinced that to win an election they have to do something, that is where they're gonna go. And right now they recognize that, and this is borne out in all the analysis that has been done on American elections. The victory goes to where the money goes 9 times out of 10. And so because the majority of that, not majority, but yeah, if you want to raise the most money, a lot of times you got to go to people who can give you more than a $5 contribution. And so that's where their incentives are. And I agree, under that current political landscape, it's going to be tough. Yes. But as we've seen in American history, I mean, FDR literally had business leaders all um, in cahoots trying to think of a way that they could do some sort of, and this is well documented, some sort of coup to get FDR out of office. That's how against him they were. And he still got very pro working people, anti-business from their perspective policies passed. How did that happen? Well, like I just mentioned, if you mobilize people, because there's more average working people than there are rich business leaders. And at the end of the day, they are the ones who have to cast the vote. You can have all the millions of dollars in the world, and usually because people don't pay enough attention, that is what determines the election, because you run enough ads and the average voter is like, oh, I have seen this person a lot. They seem cool. But if you activate enough people and mobilize them, and they can look past the kind of brainwashing that tries to go on with the power that money has, you can surpass that. And then all the politicians see, oh gosh, I'm out of here if I don't vote along with the people. And again, there's more of the people. And by that, I just mean, of course, we're all the people, but working people, or like the average person economically. And then you can actually go against the interests of the wealthy and the more politically powerful people. And that's, again, an example of that is FDR with his economic policies that, again, were deeply hated by all of what you would call the elites. And he got it passed. And he got a lot of people, and he bullied people in his own party into supporting it, because somehow he convinced them that, listen, the harm that will be done to you by being so unpopular among the voters for not supporting this is worse than anything else. And then they went along with it. Okay, sorry, wait. And then the last thing I'll say is, other countries have similar financial systems to us, or sorry, similar economic systems, and have gotten very, very not business. Not, I don't like saying that because businesses are awesome. Not like the elite supported policies passed. I mean, as we've talked about, universal healthcare. That's not what health insurance companies want. Many countries across the world have gotten that implemented because it was more in the interests of the politicians for their own ability to stay in power to help get that passed. That's just what we have to do here. Clearly, it can be done. There's other capitalist countries with very powerful elites that were able to do it. You can go ahead and respond to that if you want. You mentioned Afghanistan and then Ukraine, and I'd love to move on to that next. So just kind of slide into your thoughts on that when you're ready.
Yeah, just real quick, what I'll say is that there, with our government and the people and the big CEOs, it's a very delicate balance that's being held. One that if breaks, I'm not saying, oh, if it breaks, it's the end of the country as we know it. I think everyone that says, oh, either Biden being elected will be the end of democracy or Trump being elected will be the end of democracy. No, let's not. Okay, haha, funny. But the balance that we have is very interesting. It's almost like a very large plate at the top of a very small pyramid that's being held in the very center. And the only thing holding it up is a small little, point where it can easily be broken and we can easily change it depending on the situations at the time. In the time of Roosevelt's presidency, this we have not experienced, maybe statistically, the economic collapse of this, early 2020s period could have been close to our 2008 Great Recession or the 1929 crash. But how people were affected then is just completely different. And there was just such a larger majority.
But take a different example, LBJ and the war on poverty, also not something that elites would be in favor of.
They had more support with the people. You guys are not working with enough support. Here's the thing, even if a supermajority in the United States supports it, they're not going to vote for it. Not enough people are willing to outwardly say, that they support it. And the best example I'll give you is, my own Republican Party. There's a lot more people in our party that believe that the 2020 election is legitimate, that January 6th was wrong. There's a lot more, Liz Cheney's and Adam Kinzinger's that are willing to go against Trump than meets the eye. Because people know, oh, it's going to affect them more in the short term to say that they support it more than in the long term. The American people don't think in the long term like they should. I think it would, our country would be a lot different. Our parties, in my opinion, the opinions would be a lot different. The parties might not even exist. If we thought long term, it would be completely different. But that being said, I'm not saying that there's not a supermajority that supports it, but there's not enough of a majority that's willing to outwardly vote for it. But yeah, that being said, let's move on to Ukraine. That's something I'm very passionate about.
I'll just say, because this is not something you'll want to respond to. I think that's should be our job, and that's what I think our generation advocating, raising the awareness, where we do have that majority that wants to fight for it. All right, Ukraine.
I just think that the things that we're going to disagree on with Ukraine aren't necessarily that of the facts. Like, I think we can both agree that Russia is the aggressor, that this is such a just, you can't even express in words whether you are Ukrainian by heritage or not, just how horrible this is, how awful Russia is. I'll come out and say this. I support Lindsey Graham and what he's saying about Putin. There's no way that the Russian people right now are going to be able to depose Putin. I'm not saying America should go in and assassinate Putin, but I would not be opposed if someone in Russia did. And if I got the news article that Putin was poisoned and was assassinated.
Oh, boo-hoo. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, great. So the war's over? Like what, But I also, support, which I don't know your opinion, so I'll just throw these out here. I support a no-fly zone to an extent. I would even support troops in Ukraine. It's no one wants to be the person to start the Third World War, right? No one wants to send any troops in. No one wants any of that, right? But we're past that point. We're past the point of diplomacy. We waited too long to sanction SWIFT and to shut off Nord 2. Just the West as a whole, I'm more disappointed, not in Biden, and this isn't something that I wouldn't reelect him for, just more my opinion in general, is that I'm really disappointed in the way that we did it. Obviously, there probably would never have been a way that we could have come at this diplomatically. Because what would have been the way to solve that diplomatically is letting Ukraine become a satellite state of Russia, and that's not what the Ukrainian people want.
Mm-hmm.
So, if the Ukrainian people wanted to be in the sphere of influence of Russia, that's a different story, and we can't say anything. But there are tons of Ukrainians right now, it's literally a supermajority, that want to be part of the West and are being killed because of it. A lot of, from what I've seen, in my college and kind of my environment here in North County, is that people are saying, come on, Russians, like, you need to protest this. I'll be happy to send you a video, through a text or whatever, of this journalist that goes to Russia. And the only thing that this Russian woman said was, I support. And police tackled her and arrested her. She could have said, and she was even leaning towards support of Putin. She could have full on said, I support the war. I support what Putin is doing.
Oh, I don't know if we're talking about the same video, but I saw one where the lady was saying, I actually really am in support of the military operation.
Yes, I actually support, and gets tackled and arrested.
Yeah.
It was right after the other lady got arrested saying no war.
Same video.
If you see what I just got the notification while we were talking earlier that there's been an overwhelming that, you know, we talk about the great resignation here with our economy and employment. You want to talk about the great resignation? Look at Russian state TV and today, all of the people that just resigned from state television, they all just put their lives in danger right there. Like they're all now at risk of death. So that's the thing, is like we can't rely on the Russian people to protest against Putin, not because they won't, but because they're gonna die if they do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's we just can't.
And they'll
We
be
have to.
suppressed in many ways. Yeah.
Yeah, they're suppressed in every way possible. So it's like, yes, no one wants to send any Americans or NATO troops to die in Ukraine. But at this point, if we don't send anyone in there to help defend Ukraine's freedom, Ukraine will fall. And an example of this is in the beginning of the Second World War, in a period what was called the Phony War. Britain and France declared war on Nazi Germany, but they didn't send any troops into Poland. They didn't send any troops to Germany because they didn't necessarily want to start another conflict like they had just seen with the First World War. And look at what happened. You know, it would have been a much different war if Britain and France put troops in Poland where Britain had a treaty with Poland saying they would defend Poland's sovereignty, you know, and that's not what happened. So it's like history is repeating itself again, and that's where just I'm saying, like, we can't come with this, for lack of better terms, half-assed approach of supporting Ukraine. You know, we need troops on the ground, we need a no-fly zone, and we need to show that the alliances that we really have fought to keep are worth keeping around. If America is going to be a global power, we can't just sit by and have another Vietnam, right? Like, we need to really do something about Ukraine, and the sooner we do it, the less deaths there will be.
So I hear you from a moral standpoint. Like, when is it worth it to get super directly involved? I would say, I mean, we're there, you know. One of our allies is trying to be taken over.
And I will say before you respond, the steps that President Biden has taken to sanction Russia and to support Ukraine, it was either 800 million or billion. I really do not remember which letter that was. The other day he just signed. Fully support that. Well done, Mr. President. I think that's something that we can all get behind. I'm just advocating not necessarily of, Mr. President, you're doing this wrong, more of just, Mr. President, we need more. Like, great first steps. We need more.
So getting into the specifics, the difference between any past conflict that you could compare it to, and I know this is like a dead horse at this point, getting beaten. That was not the phrase.
No, but I know what you mean.
You know what I'm saying. They have nuclear weapons, you know, and that's something that we haven't faced in the past when it comes to this globally involved of a military conflict. And so with the no-fly zone example, and for anyone who's not aware, a no-fly zone would be us saying, if you fly any Russian, you know, Air Force planes, whatever, we will shoot them down. And when implementing that, it can't just be a recommendation. You have to attach it to the promise that you will actually enforce that. So we'd have to send American forces to be ready to shoot down any Russian planes or air. I mean, what is the word I'm thinking of?
Aircraft?
Yeah, aircrafts that fly through that space. What that means, war. We're just declaring war. I mean, it's like a roundabout way to say it, but we would have to be ready to shoot down a Russian plane with American forces, which would just mean war with you know, at war with Russia. And while from a moral standpoint, like I just said, I would want to do everything. I'm so ready to do everything. That just means nuclear war, and that's not something you are able to do. And Putin is much more likely, based on, I did an analysis in a previous video, where he's actually setting himself up to be ready to use nukes way more than we would ever be. Everyone in the Western, everyone who has nukes I'm pretty sure, if not almost everyone, if not everyone except for Russia, uh, has a won't I forget the actual term, but they won't fire nukes first policy. And so you would only use them if they were used on you. But Russia has just kind of started announcing that, oh, we can also use them if we're threatened in these ways. Not nuclear related, just if we're threatened in these ways. And I think in Putin's current state, and this kind of, I think, refutes a little bit what you were saying about Biden's lack of action or timing of action or something. Um, he's actually much more erratic and upset with how this is going. And I think that's a tribute or a to Biden's credit and to the West's credit for what they've currently done, because reporting now from people close to Putin and people close to type of thing, um, is saying that Putin was expecting probably to do a really, he built up so many people on that border and just do like a stun type thing. And then
Oh yeah,
Ukraine would fall
no,
pretty
he
easily.
expected to have Kiev in
A week or
a
something,
week.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's funny we chose the same time frame there. And
No, he's actually, I just read an article yesterday. He's livid
mhm,
that they haven't. And he's like, what is happening?
right. And so I think most of that I think should be attributed to the incredible strength of Ukraine. Zelensky's leading amazing, the average citizen stepping up, all of that, and also the military support as far as weapons and resources that have been funneled in. And I remember a lot of people on the right and the left were criticizing Biden um, initially before the conflict happened. Oh, see, he's trying to create, make the war happen because he's sending aid to them. And they were making fun of the term. Uh, what was it? It was like lethal aid or something like that.
Lethal weapon aid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that.
Now I know what you
A way to
mean.
just say weapons and military resources, but that probably prepped Ukraine so well to be armed enough to do what they're currently doing. And I think any stronger actions would have been, because we didn't know the war was about to happen for sure, too much of a provocation. And so, but he laid out, this is what we're going to do if you invade. It's like, here's the threat. And then he followed through with the threat. And I'm not aware if there are more, like, let's do them, of anything else we could do economically that's not direct military force that could harm Russia anymore. I mean, their economy is wrecked. They've had to have their stock market closed this entire time, and the Russian ruble is all the way in the dumps. And that's an effective job of the West, just crushing the Russian economy. And I think Biden's done a really good job of kind of leading the West in that way. I don't know if they would have acted so swiftly, because obviously the United States is kind of going to be looked to in this type of conflict. And so I actually, even though a lot of times Biden I see as sort of weak, I think he actually showed enough strength, but not too much to overly provoke Putin. And at this point, just kind of bleeding out the Russian economy and letting Ukraine stand strong like they're doing is really our only option. And the hope is Putin gives up. And there's signs that could happen, even though it's like, why would he give up? Well, he was expecting to have this great victory after a small time period and then start kind of recovering from whatever damage was done to him. I don't think he was expecting to get slammed like this and then have to just sit through it for days upon days. And his people are getting increasingly upset, not even just the ones who are anti-war, just the ones who, you know, are having to wait in food lines or whatever the deal is. And so I think there's a good chance that Putin comes up with some extravagant lie about what they accomplished and then gives up because he just can't watch his uh, country deteriorate like it is. And more importantly, the oligarchs are getting really mad at him, and they're the ones who have actually some authority over him. And that's why, I don't know if you saw this report. Now I'm just having fun talking about this. Sorry, I'll stop. But a report came out talking
Talk
about
about.
how panicked he is about getting killed. And in all those photos, he sits so far away from everyone. He fired 1,000 staff members. Why does he have that many staff? And hired all new people, and then is just like super paranoid about getting murdered because even his close oligarchs are so mad at him. So I think that is actually most likely to cause him to give up, is everyone that matters is against him, even within his own ranks. And he doesn't feel like he has the political strength anymore to continue this on. And Ukraine stood way stronger than he expected. And then he has to give up. But if you do any more, instead of, I know there's so much tragedy and it's terrible, but instead of it being this conflict and then it slowly subsides, or however it ends, some weird peace deal where Putin pretends that he got some assurance that whatever, like he was
I
pretending
mean,
that Ukraine was not going to
in
join
April of
NATO.
1945, they were assuring Hitler that a win was still feasible, and no, it wasn't. You know, that's the thing. You can't. These leaders also aren't necessarily being told the truth. I don't think Putin knows how bad this war is. You know,
Mm.
why doesn't he know? Because he's going to kill his staff if he does.
If they tell him, right?
Like if they tell him,
Yeah, I was listening to a show and they were saying
like
Putin's
his
the
foreign
type of leader that he
minister.
goes, "Hey, how do I look? How's my butt look in these jeans?" And someone's like, "Oh, not the best." And he's like, "Kill them."
Yeah, exactly. Do you have you ever watched American Dad?
Mm-mm.
There's this episode that there's the whole thing is that there's this alien who dresses up in disguises, and the main character takes the alien to this, you know, dictatorship country where he has to dress and act as the dictator because the real one died, and he was just being dramatic, but he didn't know that he was the dictator, and he was all like, whoever made this pizza should have their arms cut off and their legs cut off and shot instantly. And then you hear like in the background, like someone's arms are cut off and then someone's legs are cut off and then someone like gets shot in the head. And that's just kind of what I think of is like Putin is all like, oh my God, whoever just failed this diplomatically should be shot in the face. And then like Sergei Lavrov is shot in the face like 5 seconds later. You know, they can't, it's like they have to support themselves. If you saw the Russian spy chief right before this invasion, Putin dressed him down, made him say something that
Yeah, I
wasn't
remember
what
that.
he wanted to hear, and then dressed him down again. And you can just see that guy being like, okay, I might die today. It's cool. It's just, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
the thing is just you can't, you know, they will never, Putin will never launch a nuclear weapon. I think since the early point of the Cold War, there has always been a sense, no matter how insane the leaders were, of mutually assured destruction. Where, yeah, Russia might launch that weapon, but the United States is going to bombard specifically Putin's office in the Kremlin if he launches a nuclear weapon on Kiev. You know, I
But that's
think
not even a risk you
it's
like.
not
You
a
can't take
risk
it.
we want to take, and
No, not
he's
one. Like we
threatening
can't take
that.
that. It could be the end of
He's
the world.
and he's and the only reason he's bringing it up and threatening it is just so I think in his mind he thinks that Biden's going to be like, oh shit, okay, well, everyone lift the sanctions, we're good, goodbye Ukraine, but that's not what's going to happen. He's not working with facts, um, and it's just really unfortunate, you know. Yeah, he didn't expect it. Maybe he'll give up, you know. I didn't expect to be single at this point, but here we are. Doesn't mean I'm giving up. That's the thing is that
uh,
that doesn't mean I'm gonna give
oh
up and
no. Oh,
become
there
a
we
cat person. Like I don't
go.
think Putin is gonna give up. It's just this thing, you know, I'm in too deep. I'm in too deep, man. You know,
uh.
Putin is in too deep with this war, and there's no way that
I'm
he can just
not
pull
becoming a
everyone back.
cat person. That was awesome. Okay, but I
Like
get what you're
one
saying.
cat is okay, right? But I'm not gonna like
I
have
think
50
two
cats.
cats is what I heard is the limit. When you get that third cat, now you're
When you get that third, you might as well get that fleece sweater. This is like
yeah.
fleece Navidad or something. You know, it's time. You know,
um, but do you hear what I'm saying though? Like I think it's viscerally more satisfying to say, let's go in. But all that means is we're flipping a coin on, maybe it's a multi-side coin that's more than two sides, maybe not 50-50.
one of those
Um,
D&D dices. It's like
yeah,
eight.
I should say rolling a dice. That's a better term.
That's a lot better than
Yeah,
coin.
flipping a six-sided coin on like the entire human race. That's just not. Whereas what we're doing now has some chance of stopping him and
Library
is
is
doing
closing in
damage.
20
And
minutes.
so
Please bring any
far,
items for checkout to the second or third floor checkout
sorry,
desk.
now I
Return
can
Wow.
hear
any
that one.
items due before
It's
closing.
loud. um,
Print and copy cabinet.
and at least in option 2, we're not ensuring that we're in direct war with a nuclear power. Whereas option 1, a no-fly zone and putting troops on the ground, it's like, all right, we're at war with Russia, and all that means is nuclear powers being at each other's throats.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we are at war with Russia. Troops might not be on the ground, but we are at war with Russia.
It's very arbitrary, but for some reason that's the line we draw. We can give them weapons and shoot, but we just can't shoot them.
Yeah, and I might be biased because I am part Ukrainian. You know,
Oh, wow.
I'm Ukrainian,
I
so
didn't know that.
it's well, but I say I don't have any connections over there. They're all dead from a little thing called the Final Solution in the 1940s.
Oh my goodness.
Holocaust, for those that don't know. But you know, so we just don't have anyone anymore. But that's the thing, is just no matter how many ties you have there, just someone that does have Ukrainian blood in them, you know, you don't want to see your own people being literally just murdered.
Mhm.
Seeing these 12-year, just from a moral standpoint, like just seeing these 12-year-olds walking across with a bag of toys in tears to Poland, it's just something that
Ugh.
no matter what your political beliefs are, it's something you can condemn. And contrary to popular belief right now, this is actually something that the United States is uniting over.
Yeah.
You know, whether sending, maybe not over sending troops in, but this is something that has been condemned, that, you know, even Trump is starting to say, oh, he's not the guy that I knew. Yeah, that's what you tell a husband 15 years in when they cheat. You're not the man I knew.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have married him on the second date. But that's the thing, is that in my opinion, that's the next step. And the longer that we wait, it's just, I look at World War II and how long they waited until Germany launched a full ass assault into France, occupied all of Europe, and everything that we had to do to get out of that, you know, as corrupt and fortress as the Soviet Union was, they lost a lot of people they didn't need to lose. You know, Russia really, and this was Ukraine as well, fighting alongside. Most of World War II on the Russian front was actually fought by Ukrainians. They, countless people died, and I'm not saying this is Britain and France's fault, but just countless people died because of the inaction in the first year of the war. And by the time someone actually wanted to do something, there just wasn't enough time. You know, there wasn't enough people, there wasn't enough time. And I'm afraid that we're in that spot now. And where I'm saying, if we get, you know, if we really need a catalyst to do this, a few Americans were killed in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you really want to talk about this, yeah, all
Yeah,
right,
the
throw
journalists.
your ass in there. Like, yeah,
I get you.
it's
But
just,
what I picture is like a city, an American city, or any city across the world gets nuked, and like we
oh,
see
it'll
what
be
we
bad.
saw in
It will be very
Japan, you
bad.
know. So
In
it's
no
sort of,
way do I mean let's nuke Moscow right now. That's not what I'm saying. I think there's a
I
difference
get
between
that.
a
I
no-fly
just think
zone
like
and
it's tough because what we're seeing right now, it's in our face. Like what you were saying, the 12-year-old walking, you see
it's
it
tough.
and you want to do something worse, and it's harder to care about the hypothetical or the possible outcome of a different action. But a possible outcome, it would be much more likely if we did put troops on the ground that we would see an entire city nuked, which is obviously just the most disturbing hypothetical to think
Yeah.
about. But I don't know. I also wish that there was more knowledge articulated on especially mainstream media and just in reporting about what more options there might be. Or I just think there's a little bit of like I do my best to read into stuff, but sanctions. Oh,
Yeah.
the sanctions have been
We've
done.
sanctioned almost everything we can.
And
I
there's just so
mean,
much differences between, okay, what are we talking about? And then I didn't know about step 4 before it happened. And then once it happened, I was like, oh, they should have done that, of course. And I didn't know that step 5 was an option until they did it. And I think having the experts do a good job of putting out if there's anything else that we could be doing that isn't direct military conflict, that would be great. But we are pretty effectively demolishing Russia's economy right now. So that's something. Even though I hate that that's harming so many completely innocent Russian
exactly.
citizens.
You know, you can't just hit Putin and hit the oligarchs. You have to hit everyone. If it justifies it, there are a lot of Russians that do support this, that do support the war. So
The sad part is you have to be some kind of independent thinker to get past the Russian propaganda from a young age, the state media and all that. What they're hearing is not what we're hearing at all. The good part is social media has increased freedom of knowledge a little bit, and so that's why I think so many Russians are against it. But I blame them and I don't.
it's
And
an
then
interesting lens, basically.
yeah.
And apparently I'm going to get kicked out of this office space soon, so we'll have to wrap it up. But the last thing that I can say to any of your, Ukrainian viewers is Slava Ukraini, Garoyam Slava, Shen and Vmerla Ukraini, Ni Slava Nivolya. America supports you. Good luck. Honestly, there's just really nothing much that as an individual we can do, and it really sucks. But, I hope that just many, in my opinion, just the best way to show support that's peaceful that an individual can do is, at our school, put a Ukrainian flag up like you would put up a equality flag or a pride flag or something like that. That doesn't mean that this campus is going to become Ukrainian territory. It just shows that you're supporting Ukraine. And just as a chance, if you've never heard the Ukrainian anthem, it is a beautiful piece of music, and I might be biased as well because someone that's done all the symphony orchestras for the many years I did in the musical aspect, which I know you have too. It is just a beautiful piece of music, and it's something that really has been rallying a lot of people.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Great. Great way to end it. Thank you so much, Jacob. That was definitely in the top percentile of like valuable discussions in regard to politics that I consume. So
Yeah,
thank you so
and
much
I
for that.
hope that this shows all divorced parents that polar opposites can come and have a conversation, and that you can, unite. I don't know.
You can figure out that Johnny is with you on the weeks and with the other on the weekends.
Figure it out. Like if a Democrat and a Republican can come together and have what I would call, that was pretty civil.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Like it was pretty good.
There's hope.
Anything is possible.
I don't believe that. I think you're grasping onto the label Republican. You're much more of an independent, which is I think if people could do a better job of being less in their little corner, that would be amazing. That's the biggest thing.
One of the things I think one of the first things I said was I don't fully identify with Republican, Democrat, whatever. I just happen to vote with Republicans most of the time, and that's the party that I'm going to stick with. There are still a lot of things that, we didn't touch on, and we always can later in private or on here, that I would support staunchly Republican. It just kind of depends on what you're picking. And I know that there are quite a few things that we could have picked that you would have been like, wow, you're just like a Trump supporter.
Okay, well, we'll have to do a round 2 because I'm interested to
yeah, we'll have to do round 2.
Cool. All right, well,
Good luck with your move. Good luck with everything.
Thank you. Thank you very much.